Hey everyone, look at this. We're actually doing it. Yes, your questions. I have not been ignoring them. I've not been ignoring you. I've just been very busy. And this, by the look of it, I don't know if this is going to turn into multiple videos or not. We'll see how this evening goes. We'll see how well fueled I am. Shout out to DKH, who won the USB NFC reader writer kit thing. They got in touch and they told me about a cocktail, a Barbados rum cocktail. I will drop the info down below in the what's it, and maybe if I'm feeling really fancy, I'll splice in some edit of me making one. Yeah, it's used Bajan rum. It's basically 2 parts that, 1 part lime, I think a half measure of simple, and Ango. Shake with ice, strain into more ice, garnish with microplaned nutmeg and a lime wheel, which I don't have. But if I got all that right, you know it's the first one of these I'm having tonight. Actually, this is the first one. Let's see what we're going here. Not bad. Not bad. I'm I don't know if I used a little too much of the nutmeg. Might be hammering it a bit when I get to the second round. I'll lighten up on that. But yeah. But seriously, the Bajan rum, all the way, definitely. Way to go, Barbados. All right. You're not here for that, though. You're here for this. So we, I gotta say, I love every one of you so much for writing in. I never expect any of my Q&As to be that interesting. All of the ones I watch, like Carl, Ian, Atunche, people have real things that they would ask of people with real knowledge. But every one of these questions and more kind of made me smile, I think. Hopefully they make you smile as well. So we'll start right off with Brad. Brad asks, what do you think of the diversity in the hacking and lockpicking community? In my experience, it seems like it is almost all white male environment. I want to know how the community looks like from your experience and what your thoughts are on this issue. So you're not probably wrong. I think it is predominantly some of those things. Like it is mostly. I honestly think it's mostly white more than it's mostly male. But that's again in like the kind of the circles and sectors in which I run. I think that there's plenty of more inroads and work we could be doing to make it more appealing to a broader audience, and that starts, well, in a lot of ways. It starts with getting people when they are younger and not already kind of shoved out or filtered out of techie interests. That happens to a lot of people who are not guys because of a lot of like social factors that, I mean, you all know this. The attrition rate is bad. And as far as like the racial breakdown, I think some of that stems in some ways from economic opportunity and education opportunity because the tech sector has historically been kind of a white space, especially in the spaces where I am showing up as a white person. That's probably the spaces I'm in. So I'm really pleased actually to be going to ShmooCon this weekend. They are an example of a conference that's pushed really hard in a number of ways, and you should ask them more about that, how they run their CFP, what they do to have a much more diverse set of faces in their space. I'm looking forward to the Lockpick Village there. And I'm looking forward to the upcoming Tool Board elections, which if you watch the Lock Sportscast, you might know we could potentially have our first woman on the Tool Board. So it's little changes by and by, but we're doing what we can to get there, and we can always keep hoping that others will do more. So hopefully that's an answer there. Lachlan A. Lachlan reports, I am a lawyer with some interest in the security world, and I raised my eyebrows at the recent reports of a team that got arrested during a pen test. Yes, not so recent now, but pandemic, so it's pandemic recent. What sort of legal cover do you recommend a firm like yours arranges prior to taking on jobs? You mentioned carrying an appointment letter on you. Do you secure waivers? I appreciate the full details of your own exploits may be confidential, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you consider proper legal support to be. Many thanks to you and Tara for your channel and all your efforts. Well, thank you, and I will pass your thanks along to her. Yes, so for those who don't know what Lachlan is referring to, this was a job undertaken by the firm CoalFire, big name in the industry, friends of ours. It's big name, but small industry, right? So like kind of most of the key players know each other. I absolutely know. I knew before it happened. I know even better now, Gabby and Justin. So they were on a job that it went sideways, right? Like you can read the stories. They've given talks about this at Black Hat. Like they were incarcerated. I think their mugshots involved even like the orange jumpsuit that night in the freaking county jail. The thing that happened there wasn't so much a legal problem as it was a peeing match. There were some butthurt feels, and the local county sheriff, who I'm going to go on record and say is kind of a knob, behaved, and I think deeply unprofessionally. Even a most cursory reading of that situation. Here's the situation was, they were on a job, they were hired to do a pen test of a courthouse, and they were hired by the state. Now, as you all know from like civics class when you were little kids, you have municipal governments and many times county governments, then you have state governments and federal governments. And if somebody up the food chain says, hey, we're doing it this way, there's not a lot of recourse there. I mean, we could talk about 9th and 10th Amendments and things, but for the most part, if you're the county, which this was the case, and the state has authorized something, it's kind of your job to shut the fuck up. But this situation was such that that is not what happened. The state had authorized the job, but the county felt really protective of the courthouse because that was under their purview of stuff they handle. So during the job, when there was an alarm, they encountered the building in a very weakened state. They reset, the security of the building because it was found like unlocked essentially. Then they made their entrance as if to simulate a real world engagement. In the process, they got almost everywhere, but there were some alarms, and they could have just skated out of there. But they said, let's see what's happening. Let's see if they actually respond. We do that when we think we've tripped an alarm. We don't just haul ass. We'll sort of hunker down and see, all right, well, let's see if any guards come around. And sure enough, that's what happened. Deputies showed up. Deputies couldn't get in the building because, again, it was, a secured building at this point. So the team is inside. Gabby and Justin are kind of like communicating with the deputies, like, hey, this is us, like, here's our hands. They came out very respectfully. Deputies said, hi, what's going on? And again, like, if you're on the job, a law enforcement job, pretty quick if somebody is a crackhead stealing copper or if somebody looks like they kind of belong there. And these two people, they said, yeah, we were hired to do this thing. We have this letter. Here's our deal. We have business cards. So the deputies who responded, they were like, okay, this makes sense. This is kind of cool. How do you do this work? And they were ready to cut them loose. But the sheriff showed up and got pissy. Just, the type, right? Small person with a little molehill, and they want to be, king shit. So he said, no, we're going to roll these two. We're going to arrest them. And they're like, all right, well, we'll walk. Like, literally, it's a tiny town, right? So walk across the street. The jail is right, the police station's right there. We'll just walk them across the street. And the sheriff said, no, put them in the cuffs. Take all their stuff. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? So that turned into a whole affair. Ultimately, it was an authorized job. So legally, I think nobody did anything wrong, other than the sheriff. Do I think CoalFire's account management and like sales team maybe did something wrong? Yes. I think there's some emotional work that could have gone in more, where you ask, and we ask this on our jobs, like, who are not just the legal players, who are all of the stakeholders? Who are any of the parties who might get upset or might be involved if they read our report later? And I've touched on this in other talks, right? If a building manager, like, owns a facility or runs a facility, and we're going to break into just the 5th floor. So we say, all right, well, we're not interfacing with the building management company. We're interfacing with the client. So we're going to the client will just take us up the elevator to the 5th floor. So we're not breaking into the lobby. And then we'll hit the 5th floor. Now, is it possible that the building manager will find out a job was going on? Is it possible that security catches us, walks us out of the building, and then the lobby guards are involved? Or the building manager just sees a written report. Like, hey, did you hear about that job last month? What? I didn't hear about that job. I wasn't consulted. You don't know all the power dynamics and who's got more. Maybe it's a huge company. I'm just going to say, I'm not really spilling the beans here, right? There's a huge company, and they've been on our radar before, a company called Boston, right? Like Boston Properties owns buildings everywhere. It'll probably be hard to do the work we do without having interfaced with them at some point. So imagine one client on one job. If you didn't know that, you're like, oh, don't bother telling the building manager, we're just hitting the 5th floor. What if that building manager gets rankled and then our firm gets a bad name with a huge company like Boston Properties? What's that going to do for us on other jobs? If a client says, no, we really want to bring in the building, we want you to hit the lobby and the elevators. So we actually have a good relationship with companies like that, because we always say, like, who does your building management? Who manages this actual site? Who else? Do you have shared clientele on your floor? What if, Microsoft is on the other half of the 5th floor and we're not touching their offices, but like they find out that there were unauthorized people up there doing funky things. So there's a lot of emotional management that goes into this work. And that incident, which is an awful story, watch their Black Hat talk. But yeah, like Gabs and Justin are like not prosecuted, but it was hanging over them for a while. And they still like have it, I believe, kind of on their record, and legal's dealing with it. So it was nothing illegal, but it had legal ramifications. And it's why you can do everything right under the letter of the law, but if you didn't consider other people and do the emotional work, which some people are like, oh, that's ninny stuff. Well, that's what can bite you in the end. Matthew B. Steve, I'm not sure if you're still doing the Q&As. I am, just not as often as I like to. You don't seem like an NRA supporter. You seem correct. Which, if any, pro-Second Amendment groups do you support? There are others I've heard of, like Firearms Policy Coalition, American Suppressor Association. I hadn't heard of that one. Very cool. Gun Owners of America. Yep, know those. National Association for Gun Rights, just to name a few. I will name a few others. And this has popped up in some other videos of mine about possibly when I was talking to Carl and other people. But so you've got NAGA, you've got National African American Gun Association, who does not like restrict their membership to people who are African American. They are very happy to have a diverse set of members. Similarly, you've got the Latino Rifle Organization, right? You have Armed Equality, Liberal Gun Club I mentioned. There's a whole budding community of home builders. You saw the Makers Match that I've been talking about, right? So that community is really doing interesting stuff. But yeah, Second Amendment Foundation and Firearms Policy Coalition are the real kind of super-based heavy hitters, legal eagles. Take no crap. None of the old world racism and horse shit of the NRA, especially Firearms Policy Coalition. If you had to choose one to put your money behind, do that. FPC, even though Matt Best just gave him like $100,000 from Black Rifle Coffee or whatever. Which, I don't drink coffee, but yeah, they can still take your money and put it to far better use than the NRA ever could. Susan F. asks, how's the tinnitus you've mentioned in the past? Well, that's interesting. I don't usually make a whole thing about it, but yeah, it's still there. Every now and then when somebody sends me something in my, like, hey, did you get that email? I'm like, no, I'll check my spam once in a month, and I'll go, boy, many Americans like me, if you're worried about this kind of thing, you're not alone. Check your spam folders. You'll see that 1 billion people have tinnitus, and there's always somebody hawking some baloney cure. There is no cure. This is one of those things that's very persistent. It's not super well understood by science. The best my grokking of it is it's like phantom limb syndrome, where if someone loses, let's say, an arm, and their arm is no longer there to do normal neurological things, they can get stuck in a weird feedback loop where the brain is sort of sending signals to a limb that's not there. And usually there's signals like clench your fist, and there's no fist to clench, and the brain sends more signals. And it feels in the brain like you are in fact clenching your fist so tightly that it's painful. There's really cool work being done with these mirror boxes, if you've never seen this, and it's very amazing how our brains are cool-ass organs. To my knowledge, there's no equivalent of that with tinnitus. It's just something I'm going to live with. I do have persistent tinnitus and hearing loss, and it's not profound enough to impact like my day-to-day life. I'm also just pretty stoic about it. It's a thing that I'm going to have probably forever. It's from muzzle reports, being around firearms, being around firearms with crap ear protection. Was talking to Carl about this and how Surefire is like, they're actively being sued because their ear protection is garbage. So it doesn't take much. If you're indoors with an SBR, bad day. But of all the things that I, could have go wrong with me, it's probably not the worst thing that is going wrong with me. My ankles, my knee when I try to run. Don't get old, man. It's fatal. Yeah, it's when people talk about like super extreme biohacking, what I want like Geordie LaForge eyeball inserts like you saw in the films, not in the series. If I could have like a biohacking insert, it would be bionic ears, man. Being able to have ears that like had automatic noise cut off, like I could amp them up or be at the range with no ear protection because it would just do sound cut off. Or in a really perfect world, like that'd be Bluetooth. Like I could just have my podcast in my head at all times and you would never know. But we're not there yet. Keep working on it. Grinders, hackers, bio people in the future. Alex G. Oh boy. This and Mike N. This is a long one. I got notes for you on this. Alex G said, "Do you have any favorite TV shows or series that have helped you get through the pandemic?" So no, I don't really do TV. As you know, you've seen our house from different angles in these videos, right? We don't have a TV. I haven't had a TV actually for a very long time. I'm not that kind of person who's like, oh, I don't own a TV. I mean, I don't own a TV because, well, we don't need one anymore. We have laptops, we have computer monitors. And back in Philly, we would just use the projector all the time. So most of my content though is digital. It is very either like terrible stream stuff on streaming services sometimes, but mostly for me, it's YouTube. It's a lot of YouTube creators. Now, this is what I was really surprised at. I remembered that way back in like 2019, I think it was the first Q&A I ever did, right? I rattled off this huge list of YouTube people that I like. And I went back and revisited that, and I was shocked at how much it has changed. Some people are still there, obviously. I still watch Natalie. I still watch Alec on Technology Connections, Snubs, Caitlin Dowdy, Captain Joe, Modern Rogue. I watch Mikey with Movies with Mikey. And of course, Carl, Ian, James, my firearm core people. But like so many have dropped off my list. Just some were just like shit, turned out to be shitty people. And I'm like, oh, I don't really like you anymore. Others, I just kind of, things come and go. It's just circle of life, man. But others I have picked up on. Oh, man. Robert, holy crap. If you're not watching Aging Wheels, I watch Robert Dunn. Norman, gaming historian, is up there. I've been enjoying Not Just Bikes now and Climate Town a little bit, but like Not Just Bikes. I mentioned Atun Shea earlier. Bo of the Fifth Column. How the hell was I not subscribed to Bo from the beginning? Just marvelous human being. Practical Engineering is a fun channel. Speaking of engineering stuff, my buddy Joe Grand, he has a YouTube channel now. I mean, he's had one for a while, but if you saw this like pizza finding compass that he made, or the big one, this crypto wallet. He's the guy who broke that crypto wallet recently, and his wife Keely. It was so cool. His wife was like, "That's a really cool project you're doing. You should document that one. You should put real effort in it. Like document the whole thing, and we'll edit it up. You should put it on the channel. That might be fun." And it's got like a gazillion views because he did an amazing job. Marcus Hutchins obviously has a channel now. Naomi Wu, I talk to all the time. Like her channel's doing great. There's a lot of new firearm voices. You've got Queer Armor, Tactical Girlfriend, Ian Runkle, Print Shoot Repeat. If you're not watching, PSR, oh, you're missing out. I've been enjoying. I said the Lock Sportscast. I don't think I mentioned Cocktail Chemistry last time, but yeah, like Nick's channel is great. I still love relaxing with restoration YouTube, right? So I still watch My Mechanics, Mr. Patina, sometimes TZTube, Veradona restoration is great. Stuff that like occasionally that'll pop up in my recommendations, but I don't really watch the recommendations. Like maybe on an end screen, I'll click once, but I am pretty much like Mr. Subscription. If I'm subscribed, I'll watch the channels that I watch, and they're mostly science and history and some gun stuff, right? And hacking things. I'm so curious, like, how do you all find this channel? Because I feel, we'll talk about later the metrics of this channel that someone asked about. I feel like we're all the same audience that's just kind of getting older together. This channel is never going to grow to be, a crazy gold or platinum channel. That's not what it's about. So how the hell did you all wind up here? Especially for a video as long as I'm sure this one's going to turn out to be. Related to the above, right? Mike N asked me, do you have any favorite movies? Now, it wasn't specified whether this is like recent or not, and this kind of almost breaks my rule about superlative questions. We'll talk about that rule in a minute. I've mentioned it before. But it was such an interesting challenge that I kind of broke it down. And again, because my tastes have changed so much over time, I started getting like fascinated as I was taking notes on this answer, which I have literally a whole page of notes that I'm going to work off of here. But the things I used to, and I was just talking to Carl about this too, right? Things I used to really like that I don't anymore are sort of like corruption, dystopia film, like Enemy at the Gates, Elysium, not Enemy of the State, Elysium, Escape from New York. They think I'm just scrolling through the E's in my movies directory. But no, like these are, call it a function of where we are now as a society. And frankly, we could throw Enemy of the Gates in there too. And a lot of war films. I don't have the stomach for war and fear and suffering the way I used to. I grew up on, 80s action movies. I grew up on senseless violence. And it didn't make me a violent person. It made me a person who no longer has the taste for it, right? So brutal crime and police stories. Let's rattle off a few more. Movies that at one time I absolutely loved, would have watched a lot, and nowadays I will just actively turn them off or leave the room if like somebody's watching them. Pulp Fiction, Desperado, Scarface, Silence of the Lambs, Fargo, Serpico, Sin City, Lethal Weapon, Long Kiss Goodnight, the Die Hard series, The Town, Total Recall, Wind River, American History X, the Batman films, Casino, Copland. I'm not saying these are bad films. Many of these are fucking marvelous movies. I'm saying I don't have the heart for them as much as I used to. I used to be able to watch some of those with regularity, and now, whew, even knockout pictures, Shawshank Redemption, LA Confidential, they're kind of almost up on that list. I'm just disheartened by stories of people incarcerated and kind of just brutalized by the system and being forgotten. If I want a crime story, I said, where people die, I will maybe rewatch classic noir films. And you can make the case that, those are almost neo-noir, especially LA Confidential, right? But films like The Big Sleep, The Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, Devil in a Blue Dress, a really amazing movie. A little more violent than I sometimes go for now. But if day to day, it varies if I'm in the mood for violence, but fuck me, if you haven't seen Devil in a Blue Dress, you're missing out. Classic cinema will tend to have violence, but it's muted in some way. It's utilized in a way that wasn't just indiscriminate. So Casablanca, the Thin Man movies, I'll watch those anytime. There are some Westerns, there are some Westerns that are amazing filmmaking, but I won't just pop them in anymore. The Professionals, The Magnificent Seven, 3:10 to Yuma, the Dollars Trilogy. Jesus Christ, right? Just the Dollars Trilogy, the perfect spaghetti Western films. Not just going to throw them in the way I used to before. Fuck brutal military movies anymore. Rambo, Red Dawn, Braveheart, The Deer Hunter, Hacksaw Ridge. If I'm going to watch a military film, Full Metal Jacket or Black Hawk Down, at least those portrayed the real cost in a true and non-sensationalized way, the real cost of war in some ways. But they're just not I have limited time and I'm not going to throw them in. I'm tired of death. Let's talk about two of the most perfect film franchises ever. The Godfather franchise and Star Wars. I am not super into either of those, but I recognize them as pinnacles of filmmaking. And even they've been on, I guess I'm just pandemic, right? People try to watch shit. Even those, I'm like, oh my God, why is everyone freaking dying? I'm tired of dying. The pandemic's got me tired of dying, kids. A spin on this where I kind of do could be considered heist films. So they're kind of crime movies, right? But they're more about the job. They're not about people dying. So you've got Thomas Crown Affair, Ocean's 11. But to answer, what was your name? To answer Mike's question, my favorite, we'll call it favorite genre of film, broadly speaking, is a small, dedicated group of talented people comes together and strives to overcome a unique problem with very real stakes. So that's my favorite genre. They prevail and save lives. So you've got The Martian, you've got some Star Trek films, really all of The Next Generation as a series was kind of up there for me. But there was a movie about a runaway train called Unstoppable. It was great. Space Cowboys, Apollo 13. Apollo 13 is so good. I do like sports films because, again, you're not going to get a lot of people dying. You're just going to get people struggling together for a common goal. Invictus, Remember the Titans, some of the Rocky pictures is kind of fun. I'm from Philly. What do you want? Coming of age stories, Dazed and Confused, Fast Times at Ridgemont, Superbad, Taking Chance, Almost Famous, Booksmart. If you haven't seen East Side Sushi, oh my God, it's an adorable movie. Up in the Air, just family stories, man. Family and holiday sort of just feel good pictures. I'm more like my mom all the time. My mom's, she'll talk about movies, and my dad and I would be watching whatever shoot 'em up 80s guns in both hands bullshit. And when I was little, she's like, I just like the movies where everyone has a good time and is nice. And that's me at this point. Movies like Chef, Crazy Rich Asians, Love Actually, The Happiest Season, The Holiday. Like, I will watch Hallmark holiday movies at this point in my freaking life if I have enough booze in me. But yeah, comedies and lighthearted stuff. Get 'em to the Greek. A movie about making movies, about making movie trailers called In a World was wonderful. Once Welcome Back, Mr. McDonald was a Japanese film. If you've never caught it, find it, illegally download it somehow. Free Guy. Here's one. I'm pulling stuff like way out of the history bin here, but no, Free Guy. Probably the most enjoyable film I have literally seen in years. That sent me on a spin in my head to like animated and hacker-ish films. So Ghost in the Shell, Hackers, Sneakers, Wall-E, Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen, Brave. But I'm mostly on planes. Like, I'm going to watch documentaries on planes. Something about documentaries is really soothing to me. Jiro Dreams of Sushi, a film called Street Gang. It was all about the history of Sesame Street. The Orange Years is a film about the history of Nickelodeon. If you're my age and you haven't watched The Orange Years, you will be flipping out. Shit like, March of the Penguins, Megan Levy, October Sky. Some of those are dramatized films, but about real events and real people. But again, I will plug Movies with Mikey, Film Joy, his a channel, and the podcast You Are Good with Sarah Marshall and Alex Steed. It's kind of a feelings podcast about movies. These are all about just caring about others, caring about how movies make us feel. I love their work for that reason. And yeah, honestly, if we had to bring it down to one thing, if you don't know, by the way, like how Apollo 13 was made, I even dropped this note in here, right? I'm waiting for Mikey Face to drop us an Apollo 13 episode one time, because they literally used like a KC-135, like they had a Stratotanker, and they filmed the zero-G scenes inside of a vomit comet. Like, the dedication to how that film even came together. If I had to pick one movie for all these reasons and more, it's Apollo 13. But it's of course an unanswerable question, as most superlative questions are. But I hope that was a stab that you got at. That was a hell of an answer, right? I'm going to need another drink, so I'm going to refill here. Figured we'll just leave the decanter here because we're on like a half hour in or something, and we're on like page 3 or 4. All right, Jaime M. Jaime asks, what percentage of my work is inside the USA versus outside the USA? So the consulting work, the either we're coming and we're walking around assessing the place, or you don't know we're coming. Most people don't know, the boss knows. And the penetration work, I would say that's 10 to 20% overseas. Most of it is CONUS, right? The training is really what's picked up a lot. So the training classes with Red Team Alliance, that's brought us to Eastern Europe, it's brought us to Asia, it's brought us to the Gulf. That is a lot easier to package up and deliver. But again, still, most of the training through Red Team Alliance is at one of our facilities, in Virginia or in Arizona in the West, which is moving now, or we're on some Army base somewhere. But yeah, that's, for the most part, I would say I'm stateside. But it is fun to have those jobs that take us to some other spot. God, I can't wait to, I was going to say I can't wait to go back to Georgia again. Not Georgia the state, but Georgia the country. Well, it's a little hot over there right now. The klinkali are so good that I would literally go there right now, but I would make sure I had my passport on me at all times and a clear path to the airport if things got a little more funky with Vladimir. Okay. Quinn. Quinn asks, Quinn R, what is your horoscope sign? You're trying to figure out my birthday, aren't you? I see through you. No, I am, forgive me to all of my friends who talk about this stuff, I am aggressively disinterested in horoscopes and things like that. Nope, just not my thing. Kyle J. Why do I not use my Air Microclimate helmet anymore? Kyle makes me realize that I share a whole lot of my life on that internet, don't I? Because like when I'm traveling, a lot of times I'll be throwing a tweet out from a plane or something, and I assume Kyle has noticed that when they see me on the plane, like I don't have a giant fishbowl on my head. I still have a couple. We have a couple. Air's been great. When they had made revised products with notes that I was kind of giving, they gave us another one to play with. So we have one still. I sent one of them to the mother of a good friend of mine who is much more precarious on her health. So if you do what you can with what you've got, right? If you have the means, you have the responsibility to help others. It's very Rule 303 of Bo. But the Air Microclimate, by and large, is a little bigger and bulkier than I need right now. I'm comfortable with masking. Both comfortable for like N95s and surgical masks. I'm comfortable with that risk level for me. For now, we'll see what the next variety of freaking flavor of COVID that comes around. But I'm also I'm comfortable with physically wearing a mask. The reason the Air, I was really blown away by it, was because it was way more comfortable than having a mask on your face, especially for those long flights. Most of my flights are shorter domestic hops now. I'm just bouncing in and out of Virginia a lot to the office or conferences in the area. So I'm comfortable with masks the way I'm wearing them, and I'd rather see the Air in the hands of someone where I believe she is actually actively using it right now, because our current policy as a country is let her rip with COVID. So I'd rather it be in the hands of someone where it can do more good, who may be at greater risk than I am. Nancy Y asks, have you been making changes to your video thumbnails? This could be a couple of different kinds of questions. And we'll talk about, at first I was like, no, I don't do that nonsense, which there's a thing on YouTube, which we'll talk about in another question that gets more into it. But what I think Nancy might actually mean is, do my thumbnails look different than they used to? As you all know, I used to have these sort of fuzzy thumbnails. They almost look like the furry wall. I would run them through a filter that I was like, oh, okay, we'll use this filter. And I didn't think it was very legible. I didn't like it. Was like an oil paint filter in Photoshop. There's now a suite of filters that I like a great deal called Prisma is the outfit. I think somebody said they're an overseas holding, so every image you send them is probably on some Chinese data center, whatever. But it's a variety of very cool filters, and I paid for the little subscription for like $9, and I like it a lot more. So yes, all of my thumbnails do look kind of different. They have a little more pop, I think, and I think they're cleaner and easier to read. I am trying to make my channel more accessible to like people with, my eyes are getting older, just like some of yours. So yes, that is why they look different now. And little by little, I might one day go back and change the old ones, or I'll hire someone to go change the old ones for like a consistent look, because I save, oh my God, talk about like the Snubs style of, if you've seen Snubs and her NAS and her external drives, like she archives all the videos she ever edits. I have all my raw footage. I have all my thumbnail art. One of these days I can just go back and pull up a bunch of PSDs and reopen them and refilter them, and we'll see. We'll see if that happens. But yes, you are a keen observer, Nancy, and I am doing something different. Danny D says, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out with their red teaming journey and wants to get into physical pen testing eventually as a career? It's called like My Answer to People. I actually have it saved as a link, and I'll drop the link down there, My Answer. But I send it to people who ask this question via email. Somehow I still manage to answer almost every email I receive. Don't Don't ask me what fuels that insanity on late nights. But essentially, my answer breaks down to training, training and certs. And it sounds very economically privileged to say because most training costs money and certs cost money. And some people love to poo-poo certs and say they're worthless. I try to spend at least 1 or 2 sessions, training sessions a year on myself. And I'm always, even where I am in my career, I'm there, I'm doing it. I have what I want. I will retire at some point and just be happy. But even now, I still go to Lockmasters or LTI or other, I'll go to a training session of some kind once or twice a year. I have one coming up. I'm gonna be down in Kentucky for the Safe Tech conference. I'm still a practicing safe technician, and even though it's not my bread and butter, I'm signed up for a variety of these little 1 and 2 and 3 day safe cracking classes, and this kind of tool, and this kind of system, and this kind of lever lock, because you should always be trying to self-improve, because it translates through to, on your credential sheet, it's not always demonstrating that you know certain things. It's demonstrating a capacity for knowledge and a willingness to self-improve. Employers often don't care that you studied this, that, or the other in college. They care, oh, you got a degree in, Atun Shea was just in a Q&A. He was talking about a degree in history. And in fact, it was his guest who was talking about it. But what did you do with your history degree? Well, I went into architecture, this guy said. I went into this, and then I got out of that. But employers said, oh, you were able to stay in a 4-year program and actually commit to it and finish it. So a degree can help. Training, small, you don't have to go to college for 4 years. Training can help. And not to sound self-serving, but certs can help. Certifications, Red Team Alliance exists for a reason. Red Team Certification Group is to bring rigor and discipline to an industry that formerly hasn't really had a lot of demonstration of skills-based certification. Practical demonstration of applied knowledge is our thing, and that's why the certs we have built, I like to think, carry more weight. Tactical reload. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is an interesting one. Lieutenant Commander Lorelei, awesome name. Lieutenant Commander Lorelei says, thank you for always bravely speaking up about LGBTQ issues online. Do you ever get upset by TERFs and farts in your replies? I hope you always have enough spoons, because what you say makes a big difference to many of us. They didn't specify, but I'm kind of reading us as they're in that segment. So I actually emailed Lorelei back. I said, thank you for that. And then I clarified, I'm like, it's not, we're not talking about bravery here. It's brave if you're actually facing repercussions for your actions. Way back in the first Q&A, I talked about this when I was bullshitting with Lady Vi, if people like us are unfuckwithable to some degree. So again, I'm happy to speak up online, and I'm happy to be a lightning rod for a lot of shitty people, because that's not going to hurt me. Every time that someone's being shitty in my replies, they're not spending time yelling at someone in there, who could actually be hurt by them or could suffer from that. Folk who are at risk and speak up, those are absolutely the brave people. I was just happy to let people know, I have your back. I'm glad that I'm visible. I'm glad that people feel supported. That's great. So she laughed about this. She laughed about seeing she called it hellfire raining down on TERFs who try to engage with me and then get blasted in their mentions or get their accounts suspended. Again, I'm happy that happens. I'm happy that I am a megaphone, and occasionally I'll be like, hi, this person's being a dong wagon, and those are terms of service violations. Do your thing, and people will flag a bunch of hate tweets, and then somebody will get nuked. But would I prefer if actual marginalized people had that kind of clout to sort of swat away awful shitbirds? I would prefer that a lot more. Then this is where it got interesting, right? Lorelei mentioned an exchange back in, she says in December. I couldn't find it, but I vaguely remember this asshole. There was a guy who tried to gotcha me, as she said. He pointed out, the conversation, I remember it this way. The conversation was this, and I shouldn't have engaged, right? It was some dingus with like no followers who just, I don't know, I was drinking or something. And he's like, would you actually date a trans person? You say they're women, and I'm like, well, like, yes, of course I would. What's fucking wrong with you? Like, I date, yes. They're like, but are you dating one now? To which, as I pointed out, I was like, no, sport. I'm married. My wife and I are currently not in an open relationship. We're not dating anyone right now. And this guy was like, well, ha ha ha, I knew you were full of shit. Ha ha ha. But like, as Lorelei and I were bullshitting about this. Would I date a trans person? Like, yes. As one of my friends said, like, we talked about the Kinsey scale. I was talking with someone like, so where do you land? And I loved her answer because we're both kind of in the same spot on the Kinsey scale. It was something like, it was one of those things, like a little survey, boys or girls? And she was quoting someone else, I'm sure. Her answer was like, boys, maybe, if it's like the right boy. But like, have you seen girls? And I was like, that is exactly my answer. So yes, like, I am pretty much straight. I am really in to femme-presenting people. I am all about soft skin, diaphanous gestures, red lips. I like lipstick. I like competent emotional awareness. Like all of the things that are traditionally coded as female in our society, like that's all up in my wheelhouse. And the idea that that's not what you get somehow, if somebody didn't have certain chromosomes, that like, are you checking chromosomes on a first date? Are you asking for someone's birth certificate on a first date? That's, to me, all of this comes from a place of people who, I think, in a state of immaturity, see relationships as nothing more than like plug A into slot B. Like, if all you think of are the purest, lowest level mechanics of like high school textbook sex, and that's the only value you assign to someone else as a partner, I can see how really small-minded people get tripped up. They're like, oh, well, I couldn't, be with that person because they, because the slots and things like that doesn't, that's like this one of the smallest slivers of a fully formed, mutually supportive, loving, caring, like beneficial relationship. And sex is so much more than that. Love is so much more than that. There are so many beautiful and amazing facets to other human beings. And yeah, whether someone identifies as trans, identifies as cis, that doesn't even pop on my metrics for could I be with this person. Most of my friends that I find attractive run the gamut. Like they're across all the spectrums of gender because they're attractive to me for their totality of who they are. I'm probably throwing a little image from a tweet that I really loved about this, right? Like, yeah, there are absolute smoke shows of people of all genders and of people of all orientations and of all presentations in my view. And I don't limit myself to that kind of thinking. There is another element to it. If someone said, but like, do you really believe that? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Not only would I absolutely date a trans person, probably a trans woman, because like, again, like I am very straight-ish. Like that's what I'm going for. I'm into women. And we can talk about the perils and pitfalls of conventional attractiveness and what society codes and assigns as different shit. But I will say this. I will say there is a certain hauntingly, devastatingly captivating element that applies almost only exclusively to trans women. And it's like nothing else. And it's the eyes. And I'm quoting from someone much more eloquent and better than I am on this one, right? But there is a mix of both incredible resilience and unimaginable sadness in the eyes. And I want you to, if you're like most of my viewers, like fairly conventionally presenting and probably cis or probably straight, imagine living your whole life. And you can tap into this a hair. And my trans friends and viewers, forgive me for drawing this analogy, right? But for anyone out there who has felt occasionally like the outsider, like the freaky kid, the geek, the one who was not, didn't fit in, right? You might have had a bad day or a bad year of it, or you're like, oh man, that high school sucked. I'm glad my family moved to that other town. Imagine that is your whole life being told, in a nutshell, no. Just being told no every day. Being told you can't. Being told no, you will never, you won't. This is not, like, just being told no till it hurts. And the sadness that comes through that. And yet, telling yourself, I'm going to do it anyway. And the strength that comes from that. Sadness and strength. And it's in the eyes. And I know that, right, like, a handful of people watching this right now are just fucking losing their shit that I could be quoting Whipping Girl. But, like, I'm an unconventional YouTube channel. Yes, you know, someone like me is going to drop the name Julia Serrano. Yeah, so this is what you get when you tune into my YouTube channel, I guess. So there's your answer. It was a long-winded one. I appreciate the conversation I had with Lorelei and with many other people. I'm certain I didn't do justice to that answer. Please tell me in the comments, or if you're not comfortable with that, tell me in my inbox. And I am here for you. I'm here to tell you more. That's a hell of an answer. We've got to be at what? I don't have a watch on. That's like 45 minutes in or something. We're gonna chop this up. I'm gonna keep going. I'm just going to, well, start and restop the camera. Stop and restart the camera. But yeah, stay tuned for part 2. In the meantime, you're beautiful. Stay safe out there.